I set the coffee mug on the kitchen counter, my hand steadier than I expected. Through the window, I watched the moving truck disappear around the corner, taking the last of my old life with it. The house keys sat on the empty countertop, next to a single manila envelope addressed to my daughter. Inside was a police report, a copy of her fraudulent documents, and a note that read, "You taught me to trust family. I taught you there are consequences." That was 6 weeks ago. By the time Carol and Brian broke down my front door looking for the money, they found nothing but locked rooms and that envelope. I heard later that she screamed so loud the neighbors called the police. Ironic, really. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Teresa, and until 18 months ago, I thought I knew my daughter. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Carol showed up at my house in Portland unannounced. That should have been my first warning. She lived only 20 minutes away, but she'd stopped dropping by casually years ago. Now every visit came with a request, usually financial, but that day was different. She wasn't asking for a few $100s for the girls' activities or a small loan to cover an unexpected expense. No, that day she was offering me something. "Mom, I have an incredible opportunity for you," she said, sliding a leather folder across my kitchen table. Her manicured nails tapped against the surface, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "I'm expanding the wellness business, and I want you to be part of it. A real partner, not just my mom watching from the sidelines." I picked up the folder carefully. Inside were glossy pages showing projections, charts, photos of Carol's wellness center. The numbers looked impressive. 20% annual returns, protected investment, partnership agreement. "Carol, this is a lot of money," I said, seeing the figure at the bottom. $250,000. "I know it's significant." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with what I thought was excitement. "But Mom, this is guaranteed. We already have 3 corporate contracts lined up. The wellness industry is exploding. You'll make your investment back in 2 years, and after that, it's pure profit. Think about it. You're living on Dad's life insurance and your pension. This would give you real financial security." The mention of David, my late husband, made me pause. He'd been gone 3 years, and I missed him every single day. The life insurance $800,000 sat in my savings account mostly untouched. I'd been careful, conservative. David would have wanted that. "Let me think about it," I said. Carol's face fell. "I need to know by Friday. The incorporation papers have to be filed, and the window for the corporate contracts is tight." "Friday? Carol, that's 3 days." "I know, and I'm sorry." She reached across the table and took my hand. "But Mom, this is real. I've finally got something solid. You've always said you wanted to see me succeed. Dad would have jumped at this." There it was. The first manipulation, though I didn't recognize it then. Invoking David, suggesting he'd be disappointed in me for hesitating. I told her I'd review the documents with my financial advisor. "Mom, no." Carol pulled back. "This is a private family investment. If you involve outside people, it could complicate the corporate structure. Trust me. I've had lawyers review everything." That should have been red flag number 2, but I wanted to believe her. After all, she was my daughter. I'd raised her, changed her diapers, driven her to soccer practice, paid for her college. Surely she wouldn't deceive me. I signed the papers on Friday. Carol was effusive with gratitude. She hugged me tight, and for a moment, she was my little girl again. The money transferred on Monday. $250,000, half of David's life insurance, moved from my account to something called Holistic Wellness Partners, LLC. For 3 months, everything seemed fine. Carol sent me cheerful updates, photos of renovations, screenshots of supposed client testimonials. I felt proud. My daughter was building something real. Then June arrived, and with it, a phone call that changed everything. "Mom, we have a problem." Carol's voice was strained. "The contractor we hired for the expansion took the deposit and disappeared. $50,000, just gone. Our lawyer says we can sue. but it'll take months, maybe a year. My stomach sank. What does this mean for the business? We can survive it, but we need to inject more capital to stay on schedule. If we miss the timeline on these corporate contracts, we lose them. Mom, I need you to invest another $300,000. Carol, that's nearly everything I have left. I know. But it's temporary. Look, I'll give you personal collateral. The house, my car, whatever you need. This contractor screwed us, but we're not going to let him destroy what we've built. I asked to see financial statements. She said they were being audited. I asked to meet with her business partner. She said he was traveling in Asia, sourcing products. Every question hit a wall. Mom, I need an answer by tomorrow. The corporate clients are asking questions. If we show any instability, they'll walk. I said no. For the first time in my daughter's adult life, I held firm and said no. Carol hung up on me. For 2 weeks, she didn't return my calls. The girls' birthdays came and went without the usual celebration at my house. When I drove by Carol's home, the cars were there, lights on, but no one answered the door. Then Brian called. Teresa, we need to talk about Carol, he said, his voice grave. She's not handling your rejection well. She's depressed, barely eating. The girls are confused why Grandma doesn't want to help Mommy anymore. The guilt hit like a physical blow. That's not fair, Brian. I invested a huge amount already. And we're grateful. But you don't understand the pressure Carol's under. This business is everything to her. If it fails, I honestly don't know what she'll do. She's talking about, he paused dramatically, about how she's failed everyone. Failed you, failed Dad, failed the family. The implied threat of self-harm was clear. I felt sick. Let me think about it, I whispered. Don't think too long, Brian said. Carol needs to know her mother believes in her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Carol as a little girl, holding my hand on her first day of kindergarten. I remembered the David's voice. She's got your determination, Terry. She'll do great things. But another voice, quieter, kept asking questions. Why wouldn't she let me see real financial documents? Why was everything so urgent? Why couldn't I meet her business partner? The next morning, I called Janet, my friend since college. She'd been a corporate attorney for 30 years before retiring. Janet, I need advice, and I need you to be brutally honest. I told her everything. When I finished, silence filled the line. Teresa, she finally said, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think before answering. If a complete stranger came to you with this exact pitch, would you invest? No, I admitted immediately. Then why are you considering giving $300,000 to someone who won't show you basic financial documents just because she's your daughter? Because I'm her mother. Because I've always helped her when she needed it, and that's exactly why she's asking. Janet's voice was gentle but firm. Honey, I've seen this pattern before. I've seen it in courtrooms, in depositions. Adult children who learn that Mom and Dad will always bail them out. It becomes a pattern. You're not helping her by enabling this. But what if the business is real? And I'm the one destroying it by not believing in her. Then she can show you audited financial statements. She can introduce you to her business partner. She can provide evidence. The fact that she won't do any of those things tells you everything you need to know. I thanked Janet and hung up. But I couldn't shake the guilt. That afternoon, Carol showed up at my door with Emma and Sophie. Girls, tell Grandma what you made at school, Carol said, her voice bright but her eyes hard. The girls showed me art projects, chattering about summer plans. After 30 minutes, Carol stood. Say goodbye to Grandma. We don't know when we'll see her again. What? Why? Emma asked. Because Grandma is too busy with her own money to spend time with us anymore. My heart shattered. The girls looked confused and hurt. I started to protest, but Carol herded them out the door, leaving me standing in my entryway, shaking. That was the moment I knew something was very wrong. The Carol I raised wouldn't weaponize her children against me. She wouldn't manipulate their innocent hearts to punish me for financial caution. I called Janet back. I need a forensic accountant, and I need one now. It took 4 weeks to uncover the truth, and it was worse than I imagined. There was no business. Holistic Wellness Partners LLC existed only on paper, registered to a P.O. box. The wellness center in the photos? A co-working space Carol had toured once. The corporate contracts? Complete fabrications. The contractor who disappeared with $50,000? Never existed. My $250,000 had gone into Carol's personal bank account. From there, it scattered. $70,000 to pay off credit card debt, $50,000 to online casinos, $80,000 to luxury purchases. The rest disappeared into smaller transactions the accountant couldn't fully trace. But the worst discovery came from the accountant's deeper dive. Carol had a gambling problem. For 3 years, she'd been systematically draining their savings, Brian's retirement accounts, even a home equity line of credit. She was $500,000 in debt, and the house was 3 months from foreclosure. The investment opportunity had been her last desperate attempt to stay afloat. What about Brian? I asked the accountant. Did he know? Oh, he knew. She slid another document across the table. In fact, he helped create the fake partnership documents. But here's where it gets interesting. 3 weeks ago, Brian opened a separate bank account. If your daughter had gotten the $300,000 from you, he was planning to divorce her immediately and leave with the money. He'd already consulted a divorce attorney. I sat in stunned silence. My daughter had become a fraud. My son-in-law was plotting to rob her and disappear. My granddaughters were living in a house of lies and financial ruin, and I had been the target all along. That evening, I sat in David's study, surrounded by his books and his photographs. What do I do? I asked his picture. How do I handle this? David smiled back at me from the frame. Forever 58, forever healthy. I remembered something he used to say. Love your children enough to let them face their consequences. That's how they learn. The next morning, I went to the police. Filing the report was harder than I expected. Detective Morrison, a patient woman in her 40s, took detailed notes as I explained everything. Mrs. Chen, I have to be honest with you, she said. Cases like this are complicated because it's family. Defense attorneys call it a family misunderstanding. Your daughter will likely claim you offered the money as a gift, or that you misunderstood the business arrangement. I have the forensic accountant's report. I have the fake documents. That helps. But prosecuting your own daughter? Are you prepared for that? I thought about Emma and Sophie, confused and weaponized. I thought about Carol's manipulations, her lies, the way she'd turned my love into a tool to rob me. I thought about the life David and I had built, the years of careful saving she'd tried to steal. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. Filing the police report triggered a cascade of events I hadn't anticipated. Within 3 days, Carol and Brian knew. They hired a lawyer paid for with what? I couldn't imagine. The lawyer sent me a letter accusing me of elder abuse, of false accusations, of attempting to destroy my daughter's business out of jealousy. Jealousy. Of what, exactly? Then came the truly frightening escalation. Carol and Brian's lawyer filed a motion to have me evaluated for mental competency. Their claim? That I was showing early signs of dementia, that my paranoid accusations about a fictitious fraud proved I was no longer capable of managing my own finances. They wanted Brian appointed as my financial guardian. I called Janet in a panic. They're trying to say I'm senile. They're trying to take control of everything. Take a breath, Janet said. This is a classic abuser tactic. When they can't manipulate you into giving them what they want, they try to legally seize control. But Teresa, you have something they don't: documentation. Every interaction you've had with doctors, your clear decision-making in hiring the forensic accountant, your organized financial records, all of that proves mental competency. What do I do? First, get evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist. Get it in writing that you're completely mentally sound. Second, we escalate your case with the police. This attempted guardianship is actually another crime: financial exploitation of an elder. Third, Janet paused. Third, you seriously consider whether staying in Portland is safe. You think they'd hurt me. I think desperate people do desperate things, and your daughter is very desperate. The psychiatric evaluation took 3 hours. Dr. Patel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, put me through cognitive tests, memory assessments, judgment scenarios. At the end, she looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Chen, you are one of the most cognitively intact people I've evaluated this year. Your daughter's claim is not just baseless, it's potentially criminal. I'm writing a detailed report, and I'm including my opinion that this appears to be an attempt at financial exploitation." Armed with Dr. Patel's report, I met with Detective Morrison again. "The psychiatrist's evaluation helps," she said. "And the attempted guardianship gives us another charge. But Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand the timeline. These cases take months, sometimes years. In the meantime, you're vulnerable. They know where you live. They have a lawyer trying to paint you as mentally incompetent, and they're motivated by desperation. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you should consider your options." That night, Janet came over. We sat in my kitchen, drinking tea, and she said something that changed everything. "What if you left?" "Left? Sold the house. Moved somewhere they couldn't find you. Started over. I can't just abandon my granddaughters." "You're not abandoning them, Teresa. You're protecting yourself. And honestly, you're protecting them too. Do you want Emma and Sophie to watch their mother get arrested, to see their father run away, to witness this whole ugly thing blow up? Because that's what's coming, whether you're here or not." I spent 3 days wrestling with the decision. Every time I thought about leaving, I pictured the girls' faces. But every time I pictured staying, I saw Carol's hard eyes as she weaponized her daughters against me. Finally, I made a choice. Not just to leave, but to disappear completely. I've always been good at planning. It's what made me an effective school principal for 27 years. You learn to think ahead, anticipate problems, create backup plans. Over the next 3 weeks, I executed the most complex plan of my life. First, I contacted a real estate investor who bought houses for cash. "I need to close in 2 weeks," I told him. "Whatever price you offer, I accept, as long as we close fast and confidentially." He offered $230,000 for a house worth $300,000. I took it. Second, I opened new bank accounts in Arizona under my maiden name. I'd never legally changed it after marriage, so the accounts were legitimate, just unknown to Carol and Brian. Third, I transferred my retirement accounts to new institutions, changed all my passwords, and set up alerts for any attempt to access my financial information. Fourth, I rented a secure storage unit 2 hours away and began secretly moving items I wanted to keep. Photos, David's books, my mother's china. Little by little, the house emptied. Fifth, I arranged for a moving company to pick up everything else on a specific date. The rest would go to charity. Sixth, I consulted with the police about a victim protection measure. They agreed to flag my new address as confidential in all systems. I told no one except Janet, the detective, and my attorney. Not my neighbors, not my book club, not the girls' school. The fewer people who knew, the safer I was. The hardest part was the granddaughters. I wrote them letters, one for when they turned 18, explaining everything. I set up educational trust funds in their names, accessible only to them, when they became adults. Carol and Brian would never touch that money. I gave the letters and trust information to my attorney with strict instructions. "They'll hate me," I told Janet the night before I left. "They might, for a while. But someday they'll understand. And more importantly, Teresa, you're modeling something crucial, that you don't have to accept abuse, even from family, especially from family." The last thing I did before leaving was prepare that manila envelope. Inside, I included a copy of the police report, a copy of the forensic accountant's findings, a copy of their attempted guardianship motion, a copy of Dr. Patel's psychiatric evaluation. A simple note. The note took me 2 hours to write. I rewrote it 7 times. In the end, I kept it simple. Carol, I spent 38 years loving you, raising you, supporting you. I taught you to trust family. You taught me there are consequences. The police have everything. Your choice now is whether you get help or get prosecuted. I pray you choose help. The trust funds for Emma and Sophie are safe. They'll get them when they're 18. You can't touch them. You can't use them to manipulate me. I'm gone, and I'm not coming back. I hope someday you understand why. I hope someday your daughters forgive me. I hope someday you forgive yourself. Love, Mom. On a Wednesday morning in late September, I locked my front door for the last time. The moving truck had left at dawn. I'd loaded my car with essentials. My flight to Phoenix left at 2 p.m. I drove to the police station first, told Detective Morrison I was leaving, gave her my new attorney's contact information. Then I drove to Janet's house, hugged her goodbye, and promised to call when I was settled. "You're brave," she said. "I'm terrified," I admitted. Brave people usually are. The flight felt surreal. I kept expecting someone to stop me, to somehow know what I was doing. But no one did. I was just another older woman traveling alone, invisible and unremarkable. I'd rented a small house in Sedona, Arizona, a place Carol had never been, had never expressed interest in. The red rocks were stunning. The silence was profound. That first night, I sat on the patio watching the sunset, and I cried. For the daughter I thought I had. For the granddaughters I might never see again. For the life I'd left behind. For David, who wasn't there to hold me through this impossible moment. But underneath the grief was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. For 18 months, I'd been manipulated, gaslit, threatened, and exploited. I'd been treated like an ATM with feelings, valued only for what I could provide. And I'd tolerated it because she was my daughter. But being someone's mother doesn't mean accepting abuse. I'd taught that to hundreds of students over my career, that they deserved respect, that love shouldn't hurt, that they had the right to protect themselves. I just never thought I'd need to apply those lessons to my own child. According to Detective Morrison, who I spoke with 2 weeks after arriving in Sedona, Carol and Brian went to my house the day the closing was finalized. They'd planned to confront me one more time, to pressure me into dropping the charges. They'd even brought the girls, planning to use them as emotional leverage. Instead, they found locked doors, empty rooms, and that manila envelope. Detective Morrison said Carol became hysterical when she opened it. Neighbors called the police. By the time officers arrived, Brian had disappeared, left Carol standing in the empty driveway, screaming at a house that no longer belonged to her mother. Brian was picked up 3 days later, trying to cross into Canada with $75,000 in cash money he'd drained from their joint accounts before abandoning Carol. Carol was arrested 2 weeks later. The charges: wire fraud, elder financial abuse, attempted financial exploitation through false guardianship. The prosecutor was taking it seriously because of the attempt to declare me mentally incompetent. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Janet flew out to visit me for Thanksgiving. We cooked a small dinner, just the two of us, and talked about everything except Carol. "Have you heard from her?" Janet finally asked over pumpkin pie. "No." Her attorney sent a letter asking if I'd drop the charges, if she entered a treatment program. Gambling addiction, they're calling it. "What did you say?" I said I'd consider it if she completes a full year of intensive treatment and pays restitution. Not to me, I don't want her money. But to the other people she scammed. The accountant found evidence of at least 4 other victims. "You're giving her a path back. I'm giving her a choice. She can accept consequences and get help, or she can fight this and lose everything. That's the most loving thing I can do right now." Janet squeezed my hand. "David would be proud of you." Would he? I'm not sure. Maybe he'd say I should have helped her one more time, given her one more chance. David would say you loved her enough to let her face the truth. That's what real love does. The holidays were hard. I thought about Emma and Sophie constantly. Wondered what they were being told, whether they hated me. Carol was out on bail, living with her parents, Brian's parents, and preparing for trial. In January, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. Not from Carol, but from her treatment center. Dear Mrs. Chen, I'm writing with your daughter's permission. Carol has been in our intensive program for 6 weeks. Part of her treatment involves making amends to those she's harmed. She's not ready to contact you directly, but she wanted you to know she's taking responsibility. She's attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings daily. She's working with a financial counselor to understand the scope of her actions. She's in therapy addressing the underlying issues that led to her addiction. This is a long process, and there are no guarantees, but I wanted you to know she's trying. If you're willing, we could arrange a mediated conversation in the future. No pressure. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Clinical Director. I read the letter 3 times, then I put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again for a month. In February, Detective Morrison called with an update. Carol took a plea deal. 2 years in a minimum security facility, 5 years probation, mandatory continued treatment, and restitution to all victims. She gave up Brian's location. Turns out he was hiding in Toronto. Canadian authorities are extraditing him. He's looking at 5 to 7 years. And the girls? Living with Carol's mother-in-law temporarily. Carol's mother-in-law reached out to our victim services coordinator, she said. She said she'd like you to know the girls are safe and cared for. She doesn't blame you for any of this. I started crying. I abandoned them. No, Teresa. You protected yourself. There's a difference. In March, I started volunteering at a senior center in Sedona, teaching a financial literacy class. How to Protect Yourself from Financial Exploitation was the title. 20 people showed up the first session. Half of them had stories similar to mine: adult children, other family members, supposed investment opportunities. The hardest part, one woman said, is that you want to believe them. Because they're family. That's exactly what predators count on, I replied. Love isn't supposed to hurt your bank account. Teaching helped. Every week, I told my story not for pity, but as a cautionary tale. I was a school principal for 27 years, I'd say. I wasn't naive or stupid, but I was vulnerable in one specific way. I desperately wanted to believe my daughter. That's what they target. In April, Carol's mother-in-law called me. Her name was Patricia, and I'd met her exactly 3 times before everything happened. Teresa, I don't know if you want to hear from me, she started. I do. How are the girls? Confused, sad, angry, but they're resilient. We've got them in therapy. Emma asks about you sometimes. My heart broke and healed simultaneously. What does she ask? Why you left? Why you didn't say goodbye? I've been honest with her, in age-appropriate ways. I told her that sometimes adults make very bad choices, and sometimes other adults have to protect themselves, and none of it is the children's fault. Thank you. Teresa, I want you to know I had no idea what Carol and Brian were doing. If I'd known, I would have stopped it. I'm so sorry you went through this. We talked for an hour. She promised to give the girls my new phone number when they were ready. Not yet, but someday. It's been 16 months since I left Portland. I'm 72 now. My house in Sedona is small but peaceful. I've made friends through volunteering. Janet visits every few months. I've taken up hiking, something David and I always talked about doing but never made time for. Last month, I got a letter from Carol. She's 8 months into her sentence. Dear Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know I'm sober from gambling for 13 months. I've been working with a therapist who specializes in addiction and family trauma. We've been talking about patterns, about how I learned that problems could be solved with money, that asking you for help always worked, that I never had to face consequences because you'd rescue me. I'm not blaming you. You were a good mother. But I became an adult who expected the world to work the way our household did, where problems disappeared if I just asked the right way. I destroyed that illusion, and in the process, I almost destroyed you. I'm sorry. I'm working on making amends to everyone I hurt. I know it's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke, but I'm trying to become someone Emma and Sophie can respect someday. Someone you could be proud of. I understand if you never want to see me again. But if you're ever willing to talk, I'd like to try. Your daughter. Carol. I've read it every day since it arrived. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. The truth is, I don't know if our relationship can be repaired. I don't know if I want it to be. But I do know this. Leaving was the right choice. Protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. And giving Carol the space to hit rock bottom, to face consequences, to actually change, that was the most loving thing I could have done. Sometimes love looks like saying yes. Sometimes it looks like saying no. And sometimes it looks like walking away so both of you can survive. This morning, I hiked Cathedral Rock and watched the sunrise paint the red stones gold. I thought about David, about the life we built, about the money we saved for a secure retirement. I thought about Carol, about the granddaughters I haven't seen in over a year, about the uncertain future. And then I thought about the woman I am now, someone who knows her worth, who won't be manipulated, who chose peace over obligation. I'm starting to write my story down, all of it, not just for me but for Emma and Sophie. Someday they'll want to understand what happened. Someday, they'll need to know that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Someday they'll be old enough to know that sometimes the strongest thing a grandmother can do is teach her granddaughters what healthy boundaries look like, even when it breaks her heart. I'm Teresa. I'm a mother who loved her daughter enough to let her face the truth. I'm a grandmother who protected her granddaughter's future, even though it meant disappearing from their present. I'm a woman who started over at 67 because staying would have cost me everything. And I'm finally, after all these months, learning to be okay with that.